Hi, my name is Fred Weller, and I love movies. And I want to talk about why I love John Carter from 2012. Now, if I just did my entire discussion and explained why I love this movie with just this image in front of you, you would probably think that the movie was about John Carter. But in fact, it's a love story. It's about two characters, and so really this is the image you're going to get for the rest of my discussion. Why? Because both Deja and John are the key characters that we need to focus on. It's about them. So there are a lot of dramas around this film. None of the dramas around John Carter, the film, really matter though, because I think it's an awesome movie. But I will outline quickly the mess that John Carter experienced. Not really a fault of the material, in many respects not even a fault of the movie itself. Unfortunately, the Barsoom magazine and the novel series is so old. You have to go back to 1912, and the grandfather of modern science fiction, fantasy and adventure, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Most people don't even know who that is. They certainly don't know what the Barsoom novel series is or the magazines, and they'd have no idea that this is the grandfather of science fiction, fantasy and adventure. But they have experienced his material, they just didn't realise it. So an ignorant modern audience thought that John Carter was copying Star Wars and Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, Superman, Avatar movies, and many other science and fantasy intellectual properties. But in fact, it's the other way around. All of these things that you've heard of before were actually borrowing or stealing from John Carter, and it's taken so long to get to a point where there's actually a movie or anything on film that involves the Barsoom series. They didn't know. They just thought it was copying, and it's not. The Princess of Mars was the original story. In fact, there is another title that goes right back to the magazines as well. That isn't the Princess of Mars, but the novel was called The Princess of Mars. Okay, and that is the John Carter movie. They changed it to John Carter for a variety of different reasons. The intended movie title was going to be John Carter of Mars. Instead, it wound up being John Carter. John Carter was changed by Disney because they feared that movies with the word Mars, apparently, in the title didn't do well at the box office. We had Mission to Mars that didn't do well. We had Mars Needs Mums, and that had flopped a year earlier. And so they'd just assumed that the word Mars meant disaster at the box office. So take out that word and just leave John Carter. So it's diverging so much from the original source material, it's a bit hard to know what it is, right? Also, they believed, apparently, that featuring a female in the title was considered risky by Disney, rather than a male, in terms of marketing the film to a broad audience, which is absolutely ridiculous considering that Disney's track record for successful movies and film have been Moana, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, Frozen, Tangled, and I could go on. So misguided and really not smart, but these things happen. Disney could have replaced the word Mars with Barsoom. Most people wouldn't even know what the word Barsoom means, but, the battle for Barsoom or saving Barsoom, frankly, I think they would have been better to just stick with the Princess of Barsoom. Could have worked quite nicely. It's a Disney movie. We expect there to be some sort of princess involved, and this story has one. So then there was also the massive budget overruns. The film had an estimated budget of $250 million, a lot of money. But reshoots and production delays pushed it closer to $300 million. Now, this sort of thing happens today. It's actually becoming more and more common. It shouldn't, but it does. Combined with the marketing cost of $100 million, or around about that, That's not an unusual marketing budget for a film that costs $250 million, by the way. In fact, that's quite a small marketing budget. The film needed to make at least $600 million worldwide just to break even. So that's a big ask for any movie. And then the boring marketing trailers failed to generate any kind of excitement. It presented the film as a Victorian or Western drama movie rather than an epic science fiction adventure. I like Westerns, but I never saw John Carter at the movies at the theatre. I never went to the theatre to see it. Why? Because I thought it was a Victorian drama. I didn't even think it was a Western drama. I was later told it was a Western drama, and then no, it's not a Western drama, it's a science fiction movie. But you don't figure that out from the theatrical trailers. So this doesn't make any sense, what you see, in fact. John Carter ended up grossing only $284 million globally around the world, leading to a $200 million loss for Disney. So that's a lot of money to lose. Movies do this. It happens. A few similar alien names confused the audience too. Edgar has this nasty tendency of using the letter T, a consonant that probably he needed to diverge from. So Tharks were confused with the Therns. Some of the characters also started with the letter T, quite a few. There was Tars Tarkus, there was Tel Hargis, there was Tardos Mors, there was Sabthan, there was Deja Thoris, like too many T's everywhere. And so that can confuse people a little bit. But that, again, I don't think is what resulted in the movie sort of failing. And in any case, when I talk about movies here, I talk about why I think they are fantastic movies. That is what this is all about. So let's do that. Let's look at all the stuff behind the scenes and the actors and the story itself and break it all down. Give you a good idea of what's going on here. So the director is Andrew Stanton. Now you may have heard of this person. John Carter was Andrew Stanton's first live action film. He had never done one before. He had only done animated. Andrew was best known for directing the likes of Finding Nemo, all of the Toy Story series movies, WALL-E, and some of the greatest animated films that Pixar has ever put out or made or put out in any shape whatsoever. I mean, he is a great producer of film. And he actually runs Pixar now. Stanton had been a huge fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels since childhood. And he really pushed for a faithful adaptation of the story, and he wanted to do it in live action. And I think maybe not such a great idea because that's not his area of expertise, but Stanton approached John Carter like an animated film, which you probably shouldn't do, which means extensive pre-visualization. That is not an uncommon thing with a live action movie, but lots of reshoots to refine the storytelling. Reshoots in modern movie making aren't unusual. In fact, they're probably a good thing, pick up shots and stuff like that. But there were huge amounts of reshoots taking place. So much so, and quite expensive ones too. So that makes it more difficult. The movie's budget ballooned because Stanton insisted on redoing several scenes. Now, when I say several, I mean a lot of different scenes, and wanted the film to be perfect. Now, I can understand his desire to do so. Stanton originally wanted to make a trilogy of the Barsoom series. There's actually more than 3 books. There's quite a few. But I think the first 3 are probably the best. And I haven't read the series, but that's my understanding. The Princess of Barsoom had the potential, or should I say the Princess of Mars, had the potential to be a great kids animated film, in my opinion, if Andrew had not insisted on live action. Because you could have done it for a lot less money, and you could have marketed it at the audience that Disney does best, which is children. It's as simple as that. Now, the editor is Eric Zumbrunn, I think that's right, and Mark Andrews. Now, Eric Zumbrunn was a long-time collaborator with Spike Johns, I think it is Johns, and was known for his work on Being John Malkovich, which is quite a well-known movie. Now, Mark Andrews was one of the film's screenwriters, also assisted in the editing of the film to match Stanton's vision. So there was a lot of editing taking place by various people. That can create problems if you have more than one vision going on. You have one person doing all the editing, maybe a better idea. But there have been times where multiple editors have worked well. The editing process was extensive, with significant changes made in post-production to fix pacing issues. And you'll find that this movie doesn't jump around as much as some movies can, but there is a little bit of flashback stuff going on. So pacing issues can be an issue when you have flashbacks. Producers were Lindsay Collins, Jim Morris, and Colin Wilson. Now, Jim Morris had worked on Pixar films for years, and he helped bring Stanton's vision to live action filmmaking. So it's not like it was outside of his wheelhouse. And then we have the likes of Colin Wilson, was known for producing massive blockbusters like Avatar and War of the Worlds, the modern version, the Spielberg one with Tom Cruise. The film was a co-production between Walt Disney Pictures and Pixar, but Disney marketed it separately from Pixar's animated projects. And I think maybe that is part of the problem too. As I said, I think this probably would have done better if it had been marketed like a Pixar production, and it had been animated, might have worked. But anyway, and the marketing for this film was not good. Music by Michael, now I'm going to get this wrong, Giacchino, Michael Giacchino. Now, Giacchino, a frequent Andrew Stanton collaborator, composed the score. He's also worked on films like Up, The Incredibles, those animated films of the superheroes. The soundtrack was praised as one of the strongest elements of the film, capturing the adventure and romance of the story. So for those of you who don't realize, this movie is a romance. It's got a lot of other stuff going on, but it's literally a romance. It's an unusual romance at that too. Now, Michael recorded the score with an orchestra at Abbey Road Studios in London, which tends to be something that a lot of people do. If you film outside of the likes of the States, the United States, and you're working in the UK, Abbey Road Studios and London seems to be a common place to do recording for music. The screenplay is actually created by Andrew Stanton, Mark Andrews, and Michael Chabon. Now, the Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Michael Chabon is responsible for the amazing adventures of Cavalier and Clay. He co-wrote that script. The script tried to modernize the 100-year-old novel. This is such an old novel, while trying to stay true to its pulp adventure roots, which is a difficult thing to do. Stanton brought on Michael Chabon to refine the screenplay and better adapt the complex source material, because there's a lot going on. And they also brought on a linguist who created an entire FARC, or Mars alien language, using only a few words from the original novel. Not an easy task at all, but they did it. These sorts of things happen in movies, believe it or not. The cinematography was done by Daniel Mendel. Now, Mendel was an experienced cinematographer known for Star Trek, the 2009 one with Chris Pine, the modern one, and then also Mission Impossible No. 3 from 2006. For those of you who aren't aware, that's probably one of the better Mission Impossibles, although it was certainly the beginning of that series, where it picks up. The film was shot in real-world desert locations, including Utah, to create that authentic Martian feel. Now, you might be thinking, well, is Utah really like a Martian environment? Well, they obviously did some work to it. Some of the biggest challenges included lighting a vast desert landscape while maintaining a consistent look between the real footage and the CGI elements, because they had to combine these. There were key airship battle scenes where filming on massive sound stages in London with complex lighting setups included LIDAR mapping and a gimbaled ship model, of course. The special effects for this film were done by Peter Chang, visual effects supervisor at Double Negative. And a lot of the different special effects had different approaches, things that are probably not being repeated now, and probably a lot of people would not want to repeat. The tall four-armed Tharks, the aliens from Mars, were brought to life using motion capture suits while wearing stilts, something I don't believe has been repeated. The actors had to learn to move as if they had four arms, even though only their primary two arms were tracked for motion capture while balancing on those stilts. And they've then, of course, got to act as well. So there's a lot of skills involved. It's an awkward situation. The terrifying white apes that you see in the gladiator arena were entirely CGI. So Andrew Stanton directed the actors to interact with the imaginary creatures, and later replaced what was nothing, essentially nothing there, with these massive furry-covered white beasts in post-production. And to make the white apes seem even more powerful and interact with the environment so they felt like they were actually there, they were animated to leap great distances, but when they landed, they would crush the ground with their weight. So that was actually incorporated, so you would believe that they were actually there and they had some substance, because of course they were make-believe and all put in as CGI. And of course they did have people use motion capture suits to sort of help direct that sort of stuff as well, and they usually do. Many scenes were filmed in Utah's desert, which I've mentioned, but the landscapes were digitally altered to look more alien, so changing colour and contrast, texture. Sand dunes and rock formations were extended or modified to fit the Martian look for Barsoom. Okay. The moving city of Zodanga was created using a mixture of practical set pieces and CGI extensions, and then linking that all together. It was designed as a massive mobile fortress that constantly moved across the Martian landscape, pretty much plundering it and causing, this is one of the reasons why Barsoom or Mars is dying, is because of Zodanga. But it's not just Zodanga, it's actually helium is drawing a mineral from the Earth, and that is actually causing problems as well. And this required complex 3D modelling and texturing. The villainous Therns, sort of the super beings, had a unique teleportation effect using a sort of a blue shimmering energy field. This effect was created with layered visual distortions to make them appear as if they were sort of fading in and out of reality. Since Mars has low gravity, and this comes up a lot, it's one of the main features of John Carter. John Carter can leap incredible distances because of the low gravity. And the fact that he's so strong because of the low gravity, it just, your denser muscles. The effect was achieved by allowing him to jump these long distances. How did they achieve it? A combination of wire work, obviously, and CGI to create that smooth transition and that sort of weightless motion. It's difficult. So the animators had to study real-world jumps in slow motion to ensure that the jumps felt believable. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And because he's jumping such long distances, mechanically, it's a little bit hard to figure out as well, right? You're not just jumping, it's not like a normal person jumping on Earth. The flying Martian airships were designed with a mixture of practical models and CGI elements. The actual ship wings moved like insect wings, using a combination of motion capture and also computer simulations. So they did both. Very complicated stuff. Filming in Utah brought temperatures of over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I have no idea what that is in Celsius. I don't really understand Fahrenheit that much myself, but I know that's hot. The film crew had to consume 360 gallons of water every day to stay alive in that heat. And they're working in armor and they're doing a lot of physical stuff, so that's tough. Now, the actors who played the characters, there are some key characters or key actors who played parts in this film who I think get a hard run, but I actually think almost everybody in this film has done a fabulous job. I don't think it was fair to sort of single out somebody as being that's the weak point, because I don't believe that was true at all. So Taylor Kitsich played John Carter. Now Taylor went through extensive physical training to portray John Carter, including weight training, martial arts, learning how to fight with a sword. Taylor had also been in a movie called Battleship, which had not done well. They were kind of looking at, because Taylor had actually done a really good job in a TV series in the past, and his portrayal there and his acting ability there had been so impressive, they decided, let's make him a movie star. And of course, sometimes people don't transition well from TV over to movies very well, or they are a product of a lot of unfortunate accidents with their movie productions, and Taylor's one of these people, unfortunately. Taylor is not the best actor to portray emotional depth, but he's not the worst one, and he is capable of doing it. So he's not a poor or bad actor. Unfortunately, he's not popular as a lead star, although nowadays I don't think there's really any actor that is considered a lead star you can guarantee will get, the critics on board and the audience and make money. Like that, I don't think it's not like when Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger were at their zenith. Those days are gone. So yeah, I think that's a sort of a silly thing to sort of talk about. John Carter is an old soul who's rejected war completely and is a very reluctant hero. And unfortunately, this type of hero is not always a compelling protagonist. It makes it hard for a general audience to root for him or them or her. The reluctant hero is always a difficult one. Taylor suffered multiple injuries during the filming, including a dislocated shoulder while performing his own wire stunts, and he performed a lot of stunts. Kind of had to. So Kitsich had long hair in the film, but it was actually a wig, and he shaved off his head immediately after filming. I suspect because of various health issues. It doesn't actually say why, but I think that's probably likely. In that heat, he probably had enough. The character of John is a depressed old soldier who's unmatched in battle, who's been in many battles, who's not interested in fighting anymore. And why? After losing his love, his wife, he just doesn't want to be involved in that. He doesn't see any value in it anymore. John sees no way forward other than to make himself rich and live out the rest of his days as a wealthy man. Probably a very unhappy man, but at least wealthy, because he's got nothing else. John can't help himself, though, as he continues to save people around him from death after being forced into really bad situations. It's only when John realizes that Deja will do anything to save Barsoom or Mars and doesn't actually love John. But it's more about, this is a really strange relationship, and the two of them work for a variety of different reasons that I think the audience would struggle to understand. She doesn't love John, and John understands it, other than a way of saving her true love. Deja loves Barsoom and Mars. And as soon as John sees the value in saving an entire planet as a higher calling, then he loves Deja, and Deja adopts him as a love as well. It is the two thing. It's the two people. Their primary goal is the saving of this planet, not helium necessarily, but Barsoom. And the whole story is hinged on this. And this is something that I think audiences may have struggled a little bit. I know critics certainly did. We have Lynn Collins playing Deja Thoris. Is it Thoris? Thoris. Deja Thoris. Lynn is a beautiful woman, I have to say. She's really quite amazing. Collins trained extensively in sword fighting and combat choreography to play the warrior princess of Mars. Collins describes the experience as exhausting, which I'm not surprised, wearing that heavy costume. And you'd say, well, hang on, she was half naked. It was still armor, it was still heavy, and performing fight scenes in that intense desert heat. Like, I think it was pretty tough for everybody. But Deja was probably wearing more than John was. So that's another factor to consider. John was just about naked. Deja's wedding gown that she wears is adorned with over 120,000 Swarovski crystals. Is it Swarovski? Yeah, I think it's Swarovski crystals. It's a crystal, basically. Each hand applied for like a dazzling effect. Now, Collins researched various historical warriors and cultures to help develop Deja's regal and fierce persona. So she had to look at sort of warrior women. And then there was actually a time after this film where Collins was looked at as being potentially the next Wonder Woman, which didn't happen, unfortunately. And I actually think she probably would have done a better job, but they picked somebody who was a bit younger. Collins was getting a little bit older at that point. Certainly not weak, though. Yeah. Collins had previously worked with Taylor Kitsch in X-Men Origins Wolverine in 2009. She played Silver Fox, and they were already friends, so both Lynn and Taylor knew each other pretty well. Deja is an amazing character, by the way, who's smart, an excellent warrior. She's ahead of her time. She almost succeeds in using science and inventing the ninth ray that will save the whole world of Barsoom from its destruction as it's dying. Barsoom is a dying world. And potentially end the war between Helium and Zardanga. So Deja's only goal is to save the world of Barsoom, destroy the evil forces that are responsible for its fall, and she's not aware of all the different forces working against her, which is played out in this film. Deja will do anything to achieve her goal, even give her heart, her mind, and her body through marriage. And that could be Sabthan, but John Carter is probably her first pick because Sabthan is such an ass. Okay, so that's kind of those are the two main characters, the really important characters in this film. Now, there's a lot of supporting characters that do a great job that have various purposes, and that is William Dafoe, who plays Tars Tarkas. You wouldn't know because he doesn't look like William Dafoe because it's all CGI. So Dafoe relished the challenge of playing a 9-foot-tall Thark leader. Tars Tarkas believes that John Carter can restore the Thark's honour and values after he sees his people rally behind John when John saves Deja from falling and destroys some ships. Now, since Dafoe was wearing a grey motion capture suit, he filmed most of his scenes with a camera rig on his face while on stilts, and this actually makes it quite challenging for his co-stars to interact with him normally. Like, in terms of the height difference and the fact you've got all of this stuff between you and them, Dafoe still is pretty adamant that he loved the motion capture experience, calling it sort of one of the most unique acting jobs he's ever done. And Willem did, it's not William, isn't it? It's Willem, did a fantastic job Like Taz Tarkas is a great character. We also have Samantha Morton playing Solar. Now, Morton also performed on stilts using motion capture suit to portray the Thark character of Solar. Morton was excited to take on this role because she wanted to do something completely different to her usual dramatic roles. Now, you might remember her from The Minority Report. She's sort of the telepath in the film, the main telepath. We have Dominic West playing Sabthan. West played the main villain, the ruthless warlord of Zardanga. Dominic wore elaborate costumes and heavy armor during the fight scenes, making action sequences physically demanding. He found it quite difficult. West was known for improvising a lot of his villainous lines himself, so they weren't necessarily from the script, adding to the character's sort of menacing nature. Again, another character who is done extremely well. It's not phoned in at all. Then we have Mark Strong. Mark Strong played Matai Sheng, and Mark is always good at playing villains. He does it well. In fact, I don't think he's ever done anything badly. Strong, who played the mysterious leader of the Therns, was often filmed separately from the main cast to create that eerie, detached presence. His teleportation ability was achieved through visual effects, so he often had to react to thin air during filming. So they wouldn't necessarily put him in front of another actor that he was supposed to be having the scene with. So Strong was a go-to actor for villain roles because he had played antagonists like from Sherlock Holmes 2009. He played a main villain in there, and of course in Green Lantern 2011. Even though the 2011 Green Lantern is not the best movie under the sun, the villain that he plays is still interesting. And then we have Bryan Cranston playing Colonel Powell, a US Army officer in the opening Earth-based scenes. Now, you don't see him for long, but Bryan filmed his scenes during a break from shooting Breaking Bad, making this one of the very few major film roles he did at the time because, it had to interrupt his Breaking Bad filming. Cranston had fun with the role, described it as a break from his intense, dark character in Breaking Bad. Colonel Powell has an intensity, but also a humour to him, just because of the situation. A lot of the front end of that movie is quite humorous, and then of course it gets a little bit more serious over time. Now, the plot of John Carter. Look, if you're listening to this, you already know the plot of John Carter. So what I want to do is I want to talk about it and then break it down, because I think it's interesting to see why they did things and what they were trying to achieve. So the film opens with the mysterious death of John Carter. He's actually being followed and then he dies. And at his funeral, his nephew, Edgar Rice Burroughs, arrives and inherits his estate. And also a diary that reveals an incredible origin story for John Carter. This framing device cleverly ties the narrative back to the original books, positioning Carter's Mars journey as a lost, sort of rediscovered legend. That's kind of where we're trying to go with this. How successful is it? It's probably up to the person who's watching the movie, right? I think it did a pretty good job. Now, while fleeing Union soldiers, Edgar's reading through the diary, this is where the story starts, ultimately. So while fleeing Union soldiers, because they've decided that he's going to fight for them against the Indians in Arizona, Carter stumbles across hostile Indians trying to escape the Union soldiers, then escapes into a cave of spider symbols and kills a Thern in self-defense who just suddenly appears out of nowhere. He uses the medallion that the Thern has, and he's instantly transported to Mars or Barsoom. His earthly physiology grants him superhuman agility and strength because of Mars's low gravity. And this is sort of to the way they present this is different in the book compared to the movie, because they consider him a copy, but it's a little bit slightly different in the movie compared to the book. Now, captured by the four-armed green Martians, he's always being chased by somebody or captured, the Tharks. So the green Martians, the Tharks, they capture him, and Carter meets their leader, who is Taz Tarkas. Now, through their culture's, needs, I guess, even though his culture and the Tharks' culture differ, Carter's strength earns him respect and sets the stage for a fragile alliance between John Carter and the Tharks. It's not a very good alliance, if anything. John is presented as the reluctant warrior who can't avoid multiple conflicts and can't avoid having an alliance with somebody he doesn't really want to have an alliance with, because he doesn't want to be involved in anybody's battle, right? Then we get the scene with Deja. Deja Thoris, a scientist, a warrior, is just about to develop the ninth ray energy that could solve Barsoom's environmental problems, since it is dying, return its seas and water, because the water's gone, and win the war. But it is sabotaged by the Thurn operative. This sets up Deja as the voice of reason and actually the saviour of Barsoom, who needs help, not really John Carter. Because without Deja, ultimately Barsoom cannot be saved. It is her knowledge of the ninth ray that will lead to the saving of Barsoom. But the first battle needs to be won, and she will need help for that. Deja flees Zadanga's oppressive ruler, Sab Than, who arranges a marriage between him and her as sort of a way of ending the war between Helium and Zadanga, because Zadanga is winning with the help of a new technology, a ninth ray energy ray that the Thurns have given him. And she's piloting a helium vessel, and then it crashes. There's a battle, and Carter rescues Deja mid-crash, and a bond of necessity and mutual need forms quite rapidly. It's always reluctant, and it's always of mutual need, and it's always out of necessity. It's not love at first sight. It is not a chemistry thing, and I think a lot of people struggle with this concept. Deja proposes sort of a united front with the Tharks to counter Zadanga, and Taz Tarkas is hesitant, doesn't like that idea, revealing he really has probably his own motives, but we don't find out exactly what those motives are straight away. They will come later. John Carter is unwilling to help Deja when she asks, and tries, even though the idea of trying to help her is not something he's interested in, because it just feels like another war. And he tries to convince Deja that he's from Earth, not Barsoom or Mars. Deja doesn't believe him. And this is the beginning of where we start to see that she is quite manipulative. She has a goal, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to get to that goal, right? So meanwhile, Solar follows John Carter and Deja into a taboo Thark temple, because apparently the answer to whether John Carter is actually from Earth would be in this temple. And she believes that he's a Thurn, because he says he's got this medallion is what brought me here. And she sees the medallion, and it looks like a Thurn. It's got Thurn symbols on it and so forth. It's breaking a critical rule that condemns all of them to death by going into this temple, unfortunately. And Deja is always trying to convince everyone to save Barsoom. Not just Helium, but Barsoom. Because ultimately she believes that the two are connected. Now, guided by legend, Carter, Deja and Solar travel along the sacred river Is to uncover an ancient mechanism keyed to Carter's medallion. This is because Taz Tarkas allows them to escape. Here Deja deciphers the path to limitless energy and possibly Carter's way home. In fact, it is Carter's way home, but she will not point it out straight away. At this point, Deja realizes, and this is the turning point, the light that switches in her. At this point, Deja realizes that John is war-weary, and he's quite clear about that. And she has no time for that sort of thing because she's dealing with a war. But she also realizes he is an honest man. He's telling the truth, no matter how crazy it sounds. Even though he's presented himself as an honest man and war-weary, she never really believed it. But it also means that the Therns aren't mythology. They are actually real. They are advanced aliens. And that presents a different factor. So she knows the ninth ray is a real thing. And she believed it was, but she can see it in action now. And this changes a lot in terms of the dynamics between Deja and John. It's at this point that Deja realizes what she stumbled upon. Matai Shang, that really manipulative Thern leader, ambushes the group, John and Deja, and Carter single-handedly holds off the Warhorn army of Tharks until helium reinforcements arrive, saving him and Deja from death. It is at this point here, because we had Deja have her moment, now John has his moment, and it's just after hers. And it's at this point, because he realizes that they can't actually escape the Warhorn army unless somebody stands and fights. And so he decides he will do that. It is the first time John is willing to fight to the death for Deja, but it also brings back a lot of very painful memories of the death of his wife. It's probably one of the most moving aspects of the entire film. I always enjoyed this, and I forgive it for using flashbacks during a battle. Like, usually that is a bad thing to do. That what that tends to do is you break up the action and you lose the momentum and the tension and the excitement, but it actually adds to it, and it's done very well. Quite clever, actually. Now, back in Helium, political pressure forces Deja into the arranged marriage engagement with Sab Than, and Deja pleads one more time for John to help her and Barsoom. And John rejects her, declines, and it's really more silence than anything. He's still grieving for his wife's death, and Deja sees this. She can see the conflict. So Deja gives Carter the activation phrase for the medallion, believing it will be their final farewell and that she is really doomed to be whatever Sab Than wants. And it's not a good outcome for anybody, frankly. Even for Sab Than, ultimately it will lead to his destruction. Instead, Carter secretly stays, and he hides from everyone, including Deja. She doesn't know. John is still not sure what to do at this point, but he doesn't want to leave Barsoom or Deja. But he's not completely sure what he is supposed to do next. And so the next scene is what actually hammers it home for him. Because Matai Shang realizes that John has not left and captures John Carter. And then Matai Shang, like many villains and many stories, reveals his sinister plan for Barsoom and for Earth. Not just Barsoom, but for Earth as well. And the murder of Deja. So John actually now realizes that he's dealing with a super powerful alien species that really doesn't die, that just destroys other worlds so that they never become a threat to the Therns. Not a great thing to discover. And so John Carter is at this point, he can't do anything. He's held captive, but fortunately he is rescued by the alien dog that's befriended him, and he decides at this point to go and ask Taz Tarkus for help stopping Matai Shang, the Therns, and Zodanga in their barbaric plans for Barsoom and ultimately Deja as well. This is the only reason John believes is worth fighting for. That is an entire world's survival. You might say he's fighting for Deja, but Deja represents Barsoom. For those of you who don't understand this, John's connection to Mars or Barsoom is not just the planet-wide, but Dejar is a representation in a sort of a humanoid form of the planet Mars and Barsoom as well. So he's fighting, they are the same in many respects. So Tars Tarkas is overthrown by Tal Hagis, who's been, Tal has been wanting to do this for ages. He's the one with just one tusk, for those of you who are unaware or can't remember. And this leads to sort of like a gladiatorial spectacular battle where Tars Tarkas, Solar, and John Carter fight for survival against impossible odds with two huge white apes. And believe it or not, John successfully kills both of them. He does so with a little bit of help, though, and that's something to remember. But John would be the only one who could have potentially killed any of these, just because of his strength, his speed, and the fact that he can jump is a big factor. At this point, he's killed the two huge white apes, which none of the Tharks that are watching in the arena believed. So there's a great, huge exhilaration here. And it's this point that John realizes he can actually get the Tharks behind him. So he challenges Tal Hagis to a duel and decapitates the Thark leader with a single quick sword blow. And I know this, I guess, for a lot of people was felt anticlimactic, a battle between the Thark leader and John being done so quickly. But it leads to John Carter claiming the leadership of the Tharks. This whole sequence is meant to show that John can do anything when he sets his mind to it, with just a little bit of help. But because we've already had a fight between the two huge apes, the two white apes, and John Carter and Solar and Tars Tarkas, then leading into another fight with the Thark leader would have been too much. And so deliberately, what they've done is they've made that fight very swift and quick. Because if you kill two white apes, how hard is it going to be to kill the Thark leader? It just isn't. So there's no point showing a long, drawn-out battle. So that's why it isn't drawn out, for those of you who are wondering. Now, John, Tars Tarkas, and Solar march on Helium after a little bit of a mistake. They wind up going to the wrong place, and they defeat Zodanga's troops, kill Sabthan, topple the Thurn schemes. Sabthan is actually killed by the Thurns, but John Carter was about to finish him. And the Thurn schemes are stopped. And the message being that alliances are required to succeed, and that the Tharks have changed enough to reclaim their greatness. And this is, I guess there's a phrase in here, it is good to fly. Because in the past, the Tharks would refuse to fly. They refused to take on and use technology, and refused to align themselves with other Mars or Barsoom species. But they do both of those things. They use technology, and they align themselves and ally with somebody else. Something that is not something they would normally do in their culture's current state. So there's been a huge change here. John Carter asks Dejar to marry him, and she is actually shocked, but also delighted, and agrees. And John and Dejar are married. This scene signals that Dejar has saved John. Right? The whole idea here is that Dejar has saved John from a lonely depression, because that's really what he had. But Barsoom is still at risk, and John has saved Dejar from really a miserable life with Sabthan. So they save each other in this act. Unfortunately, the moment that John Carter throws his medallion, his teleportation medallion, away and accepts his new home on Barsoom or Mars, Matai Shang shows up, banishes him back to Earth through trickery. And we wind up with a strange sequence, because back on Earth, John spends years seeking a way to get back to Barsoom, because he can't. Back to Barsoom and back to Deja. And he's unsuccessful. And the last scenes show, and there's a twist here, because we've been going back and forth just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit. This little bit here sort of moves things around. And we fast forward 10 years, and Edgar is reading through the last entries in the journal that John Carter has left him. And it states that he returned to Barsoom, that he found the medallion that he needed, and that his body is in a mausoleum and could be destroyed on Earth. And if his body on Earth is destroyed by the Therns, then his body on Barsoom or Mars is also destroyed, and he will no longer exist. And so Edgar rushes to John's mausoleum, believing that he needs to protect him, that his body may not be, may get destroyed or killed. And we don't want that to happen, right? Matai Shang, disguised as a butler, tries to kill Edgar as Edgar gets into the mausoleum. And then John Carter shows up, surprising everyone, surprising me, kills Matai Shang, and then thanks Edgar Rice Burroughs, or Edgar, Ned, teleports back to Barsoom, hinting that a saga is far from over. And this is the last scene that shows John understanding the Therns game. There's a chess game that the Therns play, and John has understood at this point that he has to play, he has to be tricky, he has to be deceptive, and he has to think like a Thern to be able to stop them. And that is what this particular last scene of the movie shows. And we get the final sort of look of Deja and John, but we don't see them actually back together. It's actually a fantastic ending. It's just unfortunate we never got another movie after that. So for me, John Carter summary. This film was made 100 years too late. A whole 100 years too late. After fantasy and science fiction and superhero writers had already used the best elements of the Barsoom story. They'd poached it all, so it kind of looks like it's just copying somebody else when it's not. The love story is not based on traditional cliches. It's based on global necessity. It's based on mutual respect for values. And it's a relationship of reciprocation. And that is in many respects, it's a much higher form of love. But for an audience that may have struggled a little bit to understand that. And, it's very difficult for actors to portray a love story and for it to be convincing. I've often heard people say, actors have good chemistry, have bad chemistry. In this case, a lot of people believe that Taylor and Lynn did not have good chemistry, and so the relationship between John and Deja is not convincing. And I would say that it is as good as any, frankly, that I've seen in other movies. It's no better or worse. The plot is a twisted web of misdirection, if you hadn't figured it out, to give the audience a sense of hope, particularly after so much has gone wrong for the main characters. Deja, John, there's a lot of things that go wrong, and there's a lot of things that they should feel quite depressed and unhappy about. So it is that misdirection is deliberately done to end the film and story on a high note, which I always think is a good idea. Also, the story, I would say, is too advanced for the audience that is watching it. It requires repeat viewings to comprehend everything. I often find that modern audiences, unless they are really watching carefully and understand everything, and they can read between the lines. Some people can read between the lines in a book and they understand. Some people can read between the lines in a film and they understand. And I think general audience, not so good at that. American audience, I think, are particularly bad at that, but general audience too struggle. There's a lot of things, but in my opinion, it is also one of the greatest films, in my opinion, that I've ever seen. And I keep going back to watching it, and it never gets old for me. And this is one of the things that you always know, when you know a film is good, when you can go back, watch it again, and you get something from it. and it doesn't get boring. Like, that is a hard thing to do, and this is one of those movies for me that I really wish I'd seen it in the theatre. It's fantastic. I'm really happy, and that's what I have to say. This is why I love John Carter, and I'm hoping that other people will see it, feel the same way about it. What will I talk about next week? There are so many things. I'm probably going to look at some older movies. I'm kind of trying to mix up old and new, because I kind of like that sort of thing. I am a person who has many tastes, so we'll probably see a lot of different types of stuff. It's not going to just be science fiction. It's not just going to be superheroes. You're going to see some other stuff as well. So, looking forward to that, and I'll see you later.